And welcome to the AVForums podcast for Monday the 27th of March. And joining me for this edition, Assistant Editor Steve Withers.
Oh, and Senator, just one more thing. Love your suit.
News Editor Mark Hodgkinson.
Enthrall me with your acumen.
Audio Reviewer Ed Selley.
You will let me know when those lambs stop screaming, won't you?
And special guest star Mark Botwright.
Your anagrams are showing.
So it's not a great week for us, Ed. If you're into watching car programmes on the TV and have been for years, there's been quite a few earthquakes that have shaken up the place a bit, Ed. And I think the biggest one is your namesake, Ed China, has left Wheeler Dealers, the world's most popular motoring show, seemingly.
It would appear so, yes. And also, he went to the same school as me. Was head boy, although he left very fractionally before I started. So it's a bit 6 degrees of separation there. But yes, there is a YouTube video explaining his reasons for doing so. But yes, he will no longer be the man with the orange gloves putting sheds back together on Wheeler Dealers.
I've got to say, I do admire the guy for standing up for his convictions and his integrity.
Why did he leave? Just out of curiosity.
Because they wanted to dumb it down, and like anything, Steve. I mean, we run into this all the time in terms of getting the balance right between what your established audience want and being inclusive enough to bring in new users and new audience. And the program was taken over by a new production company 2 years ago, and they really have changed it. They've changed the whole format. I did not like the new format, which was on the last series. It was very Americanized and was dumbed down to quite some degree. And Ed didn't do a lot of what he did in the normal series. It was
how
it was
do you
mixed up.
dumb down Wheeler Dealers?
Because it is quite technical when it gets into changing, control arms on suspension and all that kind of thing. You have to have a little bit of interest in the mechanics of a car, because the majority of the program is about the mechanics of a car and how to improve it and how to, fix design problems that were there in older models.
What is the premise of the show?
The premise of the show is that they go and buy what they think are going to be classic cars, or are classic cars, that have been left to rot or been left by their owners in a bad condition, and they basically bring it into their garage. Ed fixes it all up and does it to a high degree. A lot of it you don't see on camera because it would fill a bit,
it's really boring.
15 fill about 15 episodes. It's boring to you, Steve, because you're not into it, but I bet 99% of your mates, i.e. both of them, kind of stand getting into the technical details that you get into in your reviews. There's an audience for each and everything. The problem is...
Actually, they do, but that's why I've only got 2 friends.
But the problem is, they have tried to dumb it down, and he stood by his convictions, and good for him, because it takes a lot of balls to do that. It's easy to accept the money and go with it, rather than standing up for your convictions and your integrity and saying, well, no, actually, I think this makes the program. If you change it, you're going to spoil it. So if that's the way we're going, I'm gonna walk, which is basically what he's done, isn't it, Ed?
Yes, that's basically it. The rumours seem to be, obviously this is only Twitter and it's unsubstantiated, that the filming section that broke the camel's back, one of the earlier episodes of once they'd gone to America, it was a Datsun 240Z, and the big sort of thing that they did to this car was change it from an automatic to a manual, and it would appear that there was some sort of breakdown of communication, because Velocity's standard methodology of doing this would be to just swap the car in the middle of filming rather than actually change it, which defeats the point of the
Well, that's a bit like a review magazine or site not taking the product out the box.
Yeah, so that and they just simply couldn't get their head around the fact that obviously in order to film the thing, you're talking about setting up to film a 30-second clip, but each one of those setups is going to happen sort of 4 hours apart as the actual process sort of goes on. And I suppose you've got to view this from the perspective of making a television program. It's going to seem incredibly frustrating, but as Phil says, it was kind of the whole point of the program. So yeah, I do entirely get it.
I guess sometimes you reach saturation point, Ed, don't you? And you get to the point where you're going to have the only audience that you're ever going to have. And fair dues, they had a big audience. You know, they started on I can't remember the name of the actual channel now.
Men and Motors.
It might have been Men and Motors, but it started.
Seems appropriate.
It started about 14 years ago, and it has grown and grown and grown. But I think it's now at saturation point where I think, you know, it's reached the point that it can reach in terms of audience, and I think they're pushing it to try and build that audience. And of course, what happens there is that you push it too far, alienate the audience that you already have. And you should never ever do that. You should never alienate the audience that stuck by you for the 14 or 15 years that you've been gone, just so you want to try and bring some new audience in. And the other big change, the other program quickly, Fast and Loud, another one which I watch on a religious basis, based in Dallas. Again, it's kind of the same as Wheeler Dealers, but turned up to 11. But they're American old cars, so you're talking muscle cars and Mopar and all that kind of thing. Really, again, quite interesting. You get to see the build, you get to see them putting the stuff together. And the mastermind behind that program is, again, the master mechanic who this week has walked out. Although he walked out a couple of months ago because it was shown in the US a long time ago. But
like some Castro dying a long time ago, but we didn't mention it for a bit.
No, there's obviously the gap between it happening in the US and then us seeing it in the UK being broadcast. But you know, he's walked as well. I think that is more a case of the channel and the network where they have a habit of trying to do spin-off shows. So my understanding is that this is going to be a spin-off show.
But you know who owns Fast and Loud now, don't you? Or rather, who produces it?
I hope it's Vin Diesel.
No,
it's Velocity, same as the people who are currently borrowing up Wheeler Dealers. So it's not a good look. Although that said, if they do combine Ed China and Aaron Kaufman, I mean, you could set them on, you know, minor restoration projects like raising the Titanic and stuff like that. And I don't know. In many regards, that would be a fascinating thing because, as best I can work out, Aaron Kaufman is about 5'6", and obviously Ed China is a good foot taller. There's just some good sort of visual comedy to be had there as well. So,
yeah, totally.
You know, but
Ed China have a catchphrase?
No, that's Mike Brewer. Hold out your hand.
Hold out your hand. Yeah, the Cockney guy that does nothing.
So yeah, go on. Hang on. So there's Ed China who does the restoration.
Steve, you go and watch the show, right? Because I'm not going to explain it because people who understand it. People who don't understand it want us to get on with things, and I'm going to get on with things. So that's the two big disasters that have happened. I suppose you could say the other disaster is Anstel, who they've brought to come in and fill in Ed China's role. If anybody doesn't know him, he was the guy that worked with Philip Glenister on For the Love of Cars. So, and he's also appeared as a BBC presenter on a few things, and he's a smug git, and I don't like him.
Well, you see, this is the thing. Phil hates the vast majority of the human race. So it's, I think it's...
No, I don't, Ed.
Yes, you do. You hate most people. Your default position is to hate someone until such time as you don't. That's
you
basic.
just tolerate us.
And then you can move to tolerance.
Well, you know, if I'm being nasty to you and I'm calling you names, then I really do like you.
Well, this is the thing, but nonetheless,
I mean, you must be in love with me.
Phil and I disagree somewhat. I quite like Ant Anstead, and the actual quality of work in terms of actual mechanical work that he's capable of is exceptionally high. I do agree that if he's agreed to sign on to Wheeler Dealers after these changes have been purported, then you know that's not ideal. But in an absolute sense of what he's capable of, I don't regard him as in any way. I mean, whilst he wouldn't be my first choice to motorize a sofa, I mean, that's Ed China's, you know, forte. He's built some of the fastest furniture in the world. But he is nonetheless capable of some exceptional work. So we'll see what happens with that. I quite like the guy.
Are you still enjoying Top Gear, Phil?
Let's leave that till later in the show. We'll do that in the movie and TV section because there's quite a bit to talk about there, I think, and we really need to be getting on with the podcast. And Mr. Botwright is going to tell us exactly what we can win in the current competitions.
Okay, we've got the 4K Ultra HD Premiere Collection. That includes Deep Breath, The Revenant, Kingsman, The Secret Service, Life of Pi, The Maze Runner, Independence Day, and Exodus: Gods and Kings. Competition runs until 17th of April and is open as ever to all eligible members resident in the UK, Ireland, and Isle of Man.
Any previous winners?
Yes. Quarry Season 1 on Blu-ray was won by The Light.
Don't look into The Light.
Many people have seen him, apparently.
Okay, so that's our current competitions. And your thoughts on Ed China leaving Wheel of Dealers, Mark? Yes. Here's definitely. I did read. I looked just to see whether this was a big deal, and one of the first links came up online was a place called something like Sniffed Petrol.
Yeah.
Which did you read that article?
Yeah.
Yes,
yeah,
that's
it's absolute class. There's a car reviewer on that webpage called Ron Lanchester.
That's Roy Lanchester.
Roy Lanchester.
That needs a film.
Yeah.
I have seen those because Ed sent me some links.
Yeah, if you want to laugh, go and read those. And I think it has more impact when you've actually been on press launches and press trips and that kind of thing, because the way he writes about going on these press trips and stuff is just absolutely hilarious. I have been in tears reading his reviews. Really, really good, really funny. Right, let's move on. Hardware news. Samsung have officially launched their TV and AV lineup for the UK. Steve, you went along on Tuesday. Did they bore you to death for 8 hours? Was it like that scene in Clockwork Orange where your eyes were held open and you were forced material?
No, yeah, it wasn't an 8-hour session. I mean, a lot of it, to be honest, was kind of rehashing stuff we'd already gone through, because they did some demos of color volume at IFA using early prototypes of these TVs. And obviously, we also had a backroom demo at CES when the TVs first got announced back in January. So I actually kind of knew what to expect. And the emphasis is very much on color volume, as you might expect, because color volume, and let's just quickly describe what color volume is. If you think about, we talk often about color gamuts, which is the colors that a TV can display. And we also talk about the brightness of the television. In other words, the dynamic range between black and peak white. With HDR particularly, you've moved from a peak brightness of about 100 nits to peak brightnesses that are now reaching 4,000 nits currently on mastered material. So that's a much wider dynamic range. And the color volume is the combination of the two. So you have the color gamut plus the dynamic range in terms of luminance, brightness, and that creates this three-dimensional space that's the color volume. And obviously, which has always been there, Steve.
Yeah. But in terms of showing it graphically, it's very, very difficult, which is why within our reviews and other reviews out there who do it properly and who do measurements, you always see the 2D graph, because it's been, until this point, really, really difficult to show the luminance side of things. But we always measure that, and we always look for errors in that, and you get delta E errors and all the rest of it. For the 3 axes, it's just that in the graphs, it's been very difficult to show the color volume.
Yeah, we show a 2-dimensional graph, and the third dimension, which would be the luminance aspect, isn't generally, because as you say, for representing that graphically isn't always that obvious. And also up until now, of course, when you're looking at with standard dynamic range content, you're talking about 100, 120 nits, which is what the limit would have been on a CRT TV. And obviously modern displays can reach that quite easily. So they've all been capable of delivering the full SDR color volume, which would be 100, 120 nits and Rec 709. Of course, we're now moving into a new world where we have a color space based on Rec 2020, which is massive compared to Rec 709. And obviously, we're talking about peak brightnesses that have gone from 100, 120 to 1,000 to 4,000. And obviously, at some point, we're talking about 10,000 nits within the spec. So if you think about a 10,000 nit Rec 2020 color volume as a 3-dimensional space, and now if you can imagine a square on a piece of paper and then compare that to a cube, you understand how 3 dimensions add so much more in terms of size. So imagine how big a Rec 2020 10,000 nit color volume is. It's massive. Obviously, no current display can get anywhere near that. What we're looking at the moment is, in terms of professional monitors, the Dolby Pulsar can deliver 4,000 nits and close to Rec 2020. Content is mastered using the DCI P3 color space, which is what's used at the cinema, and that's what all content, film content at least, is going to be mastered in, and up to 4,000 nits, which is the limit of the current technology in terms of professional monitors. The delivery system for the home is Rec 2020, but within that they'll have that DCI P3 color space, which is what we measure for and test for in our reviews. So that's the color volume, and obviously what we're going to be going into, I think, this year is an arms race in terms of who can deliver the largest color volume. And clearly Samsung have sort of fired the first salvo in this arms race, because they got TVs that can deliver 100% of DCI-P3, which is great because that means you get the full color space of the content.
Hang on, they claim that. We haven't actually
they
measured it yet.
They were pretty close last year, so I'm guessing that they've expanded it slightly. I mean, they were within the 97, 98, 99% range with their models last year. So, I mean, to be fair, a lot of TVs are delivering very close to 100% already, so it's not exactly massive news. And they're talking about peak brightnesses of 1,500 nits or more. I mean, I think they were saying 1,500 nits in an accurate sense, but they could probably push it to nearer 2,000, but that would be in a wildly inaccurate vivid mode. Again, there have been TVs already that have delivered peak brightnesses in excess of that, with the ZD9 from Sony, for example. But they're saying, and they're saying, we can deliver 100% of the color volume. Now, that's 100% of the color volume depending on how you define it. So they're saying their color volume is defined by 1,500 nits of peak brightness and DCI-P3 color space, which is one way of defining it. Other people would say, well, you should define it using Rec 2020 and 4,000 or 10,000 nits because that's the actual limitations of the specifications. But since no content actually hits that, you could say it's DCI-P3 and 4,000 nits. I mean, there's lots of different ways of measuring, and that's one of the problems we've got at the moment, is because there's different ways of measuring and defining a color volume, and obviously all the manufacturers want to use numbers that look good in their advertising rather than being actually representative, and it makes it difficult to compare one with the other. So when we get around to reviewing the new TVs this year, we will be measuring color volumes in two different ways. In order to try and establish some sort of bench level performance that's not just relative to a TV's performance, but absolute in terms of the standards and specifications as they are defined. But that we'll come back to that later. I think that's probably something we can discuss in detail in another podcast. As far as the new range goes, it's what we saw at CES. So we got the Q9F, which is a flat screen flagship QLED TV. That uses edge LED lighting and has 32 dimming zones on it, broken into horizontal lines and then two vertical blocks, which Samsung's claim will deliver much more accurate local dimming on an edge-lit TV than they were doing last year. And to be fair, last year's 9000, for example, actually had really good local dimming on it. But I think they're looking at it from the perspective of trying to minimize haloing on HDR content particularly. So that's the flagship model. Then there's the Q8C, which is curved. So if they've got an F suffix or a C suffix, that means flat or curved. So Q8C, so that's a curved TV, and that's the mid-range model. And then there's the entry-level model for the QLED range, which is the Q7F and the Q7C. So you've got a choice of curved or flat there. Be interesting to see how the sales numbers measure out, because there is a slight price premium for curved over flat. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. In terms of the TVs themselves, as I say, they're using this Q branding, so it's QLED. They've got Q picture, so things like the quantum dot technology they're using to increase the size of the color gamut and to increase the brightness levels. They've also got their Q design, so they're using an all-metal construction. And they are nice, attractive-looking TVs with a very cool-looking stand. Also, you can buy optional other stands for the TV if you want. And
there was a few issues last year, though, Steve, wasn't there, with the curved panels where the back was starting to come away.
I think that's one of the reasons why they've upped the build quality here, because, as you say, Phil, there were some production sample issues. We certainly had issues. You've got an example of that in your lounge, I think. Yeah.
Though, I mean, the one here, the back's coming away from it. I mean, it's nothing major. It's just that if you were spending that type of money, which I think the 9500 was nearly $4,000.
Yeah.
You'd be upset. Having spent that much money and seen it starting to come away at the back there. So hopefully they've sorted that, because that's the only fault I could really find with that TV.
Yeah, it looks like they're going for a slightly more premium. I mean, obviously this is their premium range, and they're going for a more premium design. So, like I say, all metal construction, metal backplate, which hopefully will address issues like things coming apart. Metal stand. There's the One Connect box, of course, as before, but this now uses a fiber optic cable to connect to the TV, which is almost invisible unless you get up close to it. So that makes it much tidier in terms of wall mounting, for example. You can wall mount as a
yeah, that's great. But the power cord.
Yeah, you've still got a power cord. There's not much they can do about it. It's going to have some sort of power cord.
I know, but you go to the extent of doing this really nice fiber optic cable to go from the box to the TV, but you still got to put a power cable up there.
I suppose you could. if you're wall mounting, for example, you could have the power socket behind the TV and therefore hide that quite easily, couldn't you? And then just have this one cable going to wherever you keep your equipment. But they have a recessed hole basically in the back of the chassis, which is where you would attach the wall mount. So you can wall mount this flush against the wall. I guess this is what they call nano gap wall bracket. Basically, you can mount it flush against the wall. It's got what else has it got? It's got Q Smart, so it's got the latest iteration of their Tizen powered smart platform, which I quite like. It's got what they've done is they basically put everything into one hub now with a launcher bar on the bottom. It's got recommendations and all your access to everything is through this one launcher bar. So it's a very tidy, centralized platform, responsive, quite easy to navigate. The remote controls had a bit of a makeover too. Again, all metal construction now to match with the TVs. They've made some changes in terms of the ergonomics of the remote. And I got to say, I found the platform playing around with it. I found it to be very effective. So that's one aspect. I think they've always had a pretty good smart platform on Samsung TVs and very comprehensive in terms of the apps available. And I went through the menu system as well. A couple of changes there. One interesting thing is there's now a 20-point white balance control rather than just a 10-point, which I was like, oh, God. Oh, God. It's time-consuming. Well, it's not actually a bad thing, but it's just time-consuming.
But the thing is, though, Steve, if the truth be told, if you're working on a panel and you're getting delta E's under 2, even 1.5, on the 2-point, there's no need for you to go into the 20-point.
Not really.
You want nice graphs there, don't you?
Other than get
if you want to have a look at a really nice graph, but we all know that the graph and what you're actually seeing sometimes can be completely opposite.
Otherwise, it's obviously it supports HDR10 and HLG, no 3D of course, and no Dolby Vision. However, we're getting some demos of dynamic metadata. The TVs will support that. Whether that they can certainly support Samsung's version, which Samsung calls they call it Samsung Dynamic Tone Mapping, and it will support that. And I believe there will be. I don't want to go into too much detail because some of it's embargoed, but there will be studios, providers that will support this dynamic metadata going forward. So there'll be some news there in terms of that aspect.
Okay, cool. So we should be getting our first review samples in shortly. There is stuff on the homepage if you want to go and read more about these TVs and the AV lineup, which we haven't touched on at all, but there will be a article up on the homepage, so you can go and read all about Samsung's upcoming AV lineup and their TVs. Moving things on, Mr. Botwright, have you managed to get yourself a Nintendo yet?
No, I've shelved it. I'm perfectly happy. I've got Legend of Zelda, Breath of the Wild on the Wii U, and that's tiding me over well. Thank you very much.
Okay, we'll check in next week and see where things are then. Ed, you've been group testing some earphones.
Yes, this is a two-stage thing because first, this is, if you like, a proof of concept as to whether you as listeners, readers, so on and so forth, think it's a viable and valid method of comparing some different categories of products. It doesn't have to be earphones. And also because I found myself in a position where I had 3 pretty much identically priced pairs of earphones sat in one place at one time that although they were very similar in price, they do the same thing. Obviously, you stick them in your ears and they make music. They had almost nothing in common with one another in terms of how they went about that. So I thought it would be interesting to see what would happen if you actually level match them, which I don't want to give away a trade secret here, but I'll promise you this. Level matching earphones is bastard hard. And yeah, essentially it's a test, seeing which of these is, the sort of best all-round product, taking into account, home listening with different pieces of connected equipment, listening to both high-quality material and more compressed and video on demand, and just seeing which one comes out across all of those things as the best all-rounder. If you think that it's something that you'd like to see a bit more of, do let us know in the comments. If you say, I'd like you to do 3 home cinema speaker packages, unless you also then offer to buy me a larger house, that's not going to happen. There has to be a degree of common sense about the size of the products involved. But if you think it's worthwhile, you like the construct of it, let us know or let me know, and we'll see if we can work something out and do a couple more of them. That's the it's always about pushing. It's not retreating into my comfort zone. It's about trying to push on and see if we can do a couple more things. I say not retreating into my comfort zone. I've got a record player in the works again this month, so I'm a happy camper.
But you have pushed yourself, Ed, because you went and made a video about this record player.
I did,
because you didn't know how to set it up.
Because I made a complete Horlicks. Yes, I asked for it to turn up in a partially knocked down state to save time, and then I took it out of the box and realised that I could have probably turned it into something that looked right, but it simply wouldn't have been correct. So I was incredibly privileged to have it put together by a man called Peter Swain, who is regarded by quite a few people as the best in the world at putting these record players together. And I thought that was probably quite video worthy. So I've sent Phil a couple of clips. He came back and said that they're not completely crap. So the moment I've got the house to myself to actually record a voiceover without Fireman Sam in the background, I will do that, wing that on its way to him, and we'll see if we can put something together for your edification and education.
Good stuff. It's always good stuff, Ed. Right, okay, so let's move things on swiftly, as we are. We are really bang on message at the moment, and I'm going to try and keep it going that way before we suddenly go off on a tangent like we normally do. Mark, have you bought a Nintendo Switch yet?
What, since last time you asked me?
Yeah, just checking.
Oh, I'm managing to hold firm on this. Thank you very much.
The finger's not hovering over the buy button.
No. Actually, funnily enough, I'm kind of. It's proven a bit more of an expensive couple of months with regards Blu-rays, but I'm sure we'll get onto that a bit later.
You what?
Yes, indeed, Blu-rays. Remember them?
Yeah. Okay, we'll come back to that later. But
retro formats for the win.
But let's stick with some gaming, because finding the best TV for gaming, Mark, is a bit of an issue. So tell us all about it.
Which one?
Me or Hodge?
I knew that was going to confuse you. Let's go to Steve, who actually wrote the article and knows what he's talking about.
I'm not ready yet.
Right, so best gaming TV or best TV for gaming, however or whichever way you want to look at it. It's all about the input lag, Steve.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there are other factors you can consider as well, but in every review that we do of a TV, we always test the input lag. We use the Leo Bodner tester, which you connect directly into the TV. It sends a signal to the TV, you hold it against the screen, and it measures the lag between the signal being sent and it being received by the receiver on the unit. This year we'll be adding, we started to do it towards the end of last year, but this year we shall also be testing not only SDR input lag, but also HDR input lag by using HD Fury Integral to inject the HDR metadata into the signal in order to get the TV to go into HDR mode to test how fast the lag is in that. Now, that's how we test for it, and we do it on every TV that we review. And pretty much these days, every TV will have some form of game mode. And what that basically means is it's a mode where they bypass all the unnecessary processing in order to keep the lag as low as possible. And
unless you buy a cheap brand TV that don't do anything. It's just the same as all the other ones.
Yeah. I mean, so the TVs that we've reviewed generally have an effective game mode. You'll quite often see there'll be a significant difference between not having the game mode on and having the game mode on. Some TVs, there's not a massive difference. They've got a pretty low lag anyway. Some, there's a very big lag without the game mode on. So it varies from manufacturer to manufacturer, but most of them have a game mode. And the idea is you select that when you're gaming, gets the input lag down as low as possible. And that reduces the amount of lag time. Now, obviously, when you're gaming, there are lots of factors that can introduce lag, not just the display, but the controller to the console, internet lag, human response time lags. Lots of different things can cause lags. But, if you can eliminate as many as possible, that obviously improves your gaming experience, particularly on things like first-person shooters. So, like I say, we test them all. And in terms of last year's models that we tested, without doubt, hands down, the winner in terms of input lag, and also I would say generally as a gaming TV, for me personally, I don't know about you, Mark, but I thought without doubt Samsung TVs made the best gaming TVs for last year. They had an input lag across all the TVs that we reviewed, and certainly across the KS range, 21 milliseconds, which is really, really low. I mean, that was a quantum leap in terms of lag times compared to the previous years on all manufacturers, including Samsung. 21 milliseconds, really low. No one else got close to that last year in the stuff that I tested. And I think they would probably be my winner in terms of overall performance with gaming. Would you agree, Mark?
Yeah, I think that was probably about right. What were Sony's though? Weren't they quite low last year?
They were in the 30s.
Were they in the 30s? I thought they might be in the 20s. Yeah, I enjoyed the Sony XD93, was it? Yeah, that was nice. But Sony and Samsung were my favourites.
Sony used to be pretty much synonymous with low input lag, and then it seemed to kind of just slip from them slightly. I think around kind of 2015 time. And all of a sudden, it started creeping up again. So Samsung almost like they've taken that crown. I know the KS8000 is pretty much kind of regarded as bang for buck, the best gaming TV out there right now if you want to grab something.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll see some improvements this year. And I know from having experienced and tested some of the new LG OLEDs, they've got the input lag down to around 21 milliseconds as well. When I saw Samsung earlier this week, they were talking about getting their lag times down to below 20 milliseconds. So around about 19 milliseconds, which, we're splitting hairs at this point, but it's good to see that those manufacturers are doing that. Hopefully it will push on to the other ones. Sony, I think the
9005 was 32 milliseconds. That was HDR.
Yeah, the XE90, 32 milliseconds, and that's pretty low. I mean, that's pretty good. I mean, there was an argument we said, is anyone going to notice between 30 milliseconds and 20 milliseconds? I would say no.
But you're not going to, I don't think, because there's not even a frame has passed by at that point.
No. So that's impressive. And, it's interesting looking back through the numbers, because obviously I went back through the reviews to sort of create a database of input lag to see which ones were performing the best. And one of the manufacturers surprised me because they're relatively new kid on the block, but delivered some pretty low input lags, was Hisense. Who I think last year really stepped up to the plate in terms of not just input lag, but overall performance, build quality of their TVs, and obviously price. So I think they really delivered. Sony, as you mentioned, Mark, have always had a good reputation in that aspect. LG pretty good too. Philips have done some very good low numbers. The one manufacturer that came out the worst in terms of overall performance and input lags, outside of their DX902 flagship TV, which was giving about 35 milliseconds, was Panasonic, who, in going back to some of the reviews, a lot of them were done by you, Mark, actually, rather than me, but Panasonic were delivering some surprisingly high input lag numbers with sort of 55 milliseconds, which would be above what I would consider the threshold of 40. I think
it's interesting, really,
because 40.
Panasonic plasmas used to be the go-to, other than obviously the threat of image retention. It used to be the go-to for gamers, and then they were measuring around 32 milliseconds. So I think it's just as time has gone by and we've been able to measure it, people kind of become aware of it, of the numbers.
And don't forget that the 902 was actually really quite high until it had a firmware fix as well, Steve.
Yeah, it was. Like I say, 35 milliseconds after the firmware fix, but that was the best performing of all their TVs last year in terms of input lag. So it'd be interesting to see if they can improve on that this year. I mean, I think any manufacturer should be trying to get it below 40. Like I say, there's a lot of debate about how much you're going to notice, but there will be hardened gamers, particularly people that play first-person shooters, who will say, like, I can tell the difference if it's between 50 and 30 milliseconds. So, fair enough. I don't think I could, but that will be interesting to see whether Panasonic can get their input lags down. It's funny you should mention image retention, Mark, because obviously that is an aspect you need to bear in mind with OLED TVs. There are a lot of features in those TVs to mitigate image retention and screen burn, but I have noticed, particularly with HDR and HDR test patterns, for example, that you do get image retention on these TVs if you leave a static image up for a long time. Obviously, in gaming, particularly in certain games, you're going to have heads-up displays that are there the whole time you're gaming. And if you're gaming for long periods of time, you're likely to see some, particularly if you're gaming in HDR as well, you're likely to see some image retention. I mean, it will go away, but bear that in mind. If you're worried about image retention or things like that, then obviously LCD panels are preferable from that perspective. And that's one of the other reasons why you might...
If you're the type of person or type of gamer who likes really bright, inaccurate images, stay away from OLED, basically, is the best advice we could give. If you like accurate images with the TV's not overly bright, that it hurts your eyes, then you should be fine with an OLED if you game for a couple of hours here and there. But if you're one of these people who like garish colours and real brightness and all the rest of it, OLED's not for you, not for gaming.
So that was my discoveries in terms of input lags. It will be interesting to see how things pan out this year. Obviously, there's a new world with SDR and HDR gaming. We'll test for both, and we'll see how it plays out. But there's been clearly a downward trend in terms of input lag over the last few years, and I'm pretty sure we're going to. they're reaching a point now where getting below 19 milliseconds is going to be tough. I think there's going to be a tiny bit of lag because there's going to be some image processing going on inside that image, even in game mode. So
you're
never see them getting much lower than that.
You're never going to notice that. It's like we say. I mean, 40 milliseconds is the cut-off point. Anything below 40 milliseconds, I think you're hard pushed to. There's other things in the chain which are going to get in the way. Other than that,
and while you're using sample and hold, which they both do, don't they? LED and OLED, you're not going to get below 60 milliseconds anyway. So that's impossible.
So let's move things on. Let's got movie news next. Okay, so let's move on to movie news. Still minus 12. Haven't had a chance to go to the cinema, but I'm going to try and go this week. Obviously, we're recording this on Friday. It'll go out on Monday. Because there's Chips and Life. So at least there's 2 films I could go and see, because I looked earlier in the week and it was all Beauty and the Beast, Steve, taking over.
The calculation, though, isn't that simple for you anymore, is it? You're minus 12 in cinema, but plus whatever litres of 95 octane unleaded to actually go to and from the cinema.
I just block that one out of my head. It's a bit like the wheeler dealer mathematics, where you just don't include any of the time that Ed spends putting the cars together. None of that is accounted for whatsoever. And if you did account for it, they would have lost thousands of pounds every week on it.
Yes.
So it's the same kind of math, said. So I'm minus 12,
right,
but actually,
you're right, Phil. It is all Beauty and the Beast. Annoyingly so, because my local cinema, which I'm coming to the conclusion is utter shit, isn't even showing Life or Chips this weekend. It's like,
really?
Great, yeah, brilliant.
Oh, that's
Thanks
unbelievable,
guys.
that.
I mean, there's 2 major Life. I mean, it's a major release. This, how is that not getting a screening? So I was a bit annoyed about that. But I did see Beauty and the Beast last week.
Oh, poor you. I mean, I'm staying well away from it. I might watch it on a streaming service when it eventually arrives.
Well, I'd say I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's absolutely sumptuous to look at. The majority of the cast are excellent. Very well cast film. Emma Thompson as Mrs. Potts, Ian McKellen as Cogsworth, Ewan McGregor doing a very hello French accent as Lumiere. Luke Evans is fantastic as Gaston. My wife was very disappointed to discover that Luke Evans is gay, which I didn't realise either until she looked him up, because she thought he was well fit.
Yeah, well, you've got more luck than she has then.
Yeah, that's what I said to her. I don't think I've got a chance than you have. Also, Josh Gad, playing an extremely camp character in the film, but actually straight in real life, is very good. The only weak link for me is Emma Watson. God knows why they cast her. I know she's been getting lots of positive reviews for some reason, but I thought she's awful. She's no charisma, not a very good actress, not that good looking, in fairness, and a very weak singing voice. I thought they could have done better than Emma Watson, but aside from that, the guy playing the Beast also, is very good as well, as is the makeup effects, and the effects generally are superb.
The thing with Emma Watson, Stephen, I think the only reason she's been cast is the fact that she was in a long line of Harry Potter films, and that is the demographic that they are going for.
Yeah, there were an awful lot of little girls in like beauty costumes and stuff like that at the screening I was at, because I went to a fairly early screening, and it was a lot of kids. I've got to say though, the kids were absolutely quiet throughout the entire film. Didn't hear a peep out of them. So they were clearly digging it, because they were very
scared
very
about the man.
They were terrified. They were terrified of the creepy sex offender in the show.
I wasn't on my own. It wasn't as bad as when it went to go and see A Fault in Their Stars, when it was me and 400 crying teenage girls. That was very uncomfortable.
They're crying because you were there.
No, they were crying because it's a sad movie at the end, and I got to admit, I was weeping a little bit.
Steve exposed himself and all went south very quickly.
Anyway, back to Beauty and the Beast.
Do you have one of those big tubs of popcorn?
Like in Diner. It stays very. I mean, it's basically a live action version of the cartoon. I mean, it's basically similar. Although, interestingly, Phil, you mentioned the Honest trailer last week. They do address certain plot points that they raised in Honest trailers in this film, as in why don't anyone remember the Beast and why doesn't anyone remember the Prince, and all this sort of stuff. That is actually addressed, and there are some additional songs that were written especially for the film to expand out the story in certain aspects. All the things you remember in there. Interestingly, the one song wasn't in the original version of the film, but it is in the special edition version of the animated film called Human Again. That song isn't in this film version. I don't know if any of the songs that were ported across from the stage musical, because there was also that as well, but I've never seen it. But I've got to say, overall, I thoroughly enjoyed the film. I'd definitely give it a solid 8
Who was the composer? Is it Alan Menken? Is it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Steve, does the live action film sort of deal with one of the issues that the more I think about it, the more it disturbs me about the cartoon? Now there are spoilers for the cartoon involved in this, and if it involves spoilers for the film, then just cut it. But the Beast in the cartoon has to find love before his 21st birthday.
No, that's not right. In the cartoon, it's before the last petal falls off the rose.
Yeah, but he has a certain amount of time, and it's to do with his birthday, which would infer that the magic woman turned him into a beast when he was about 11 years old.
Oh, yes, he is. You're right. In the cartoon, it suggests that he was quite young when that happened to him. In the animated film, you see the prince, and he is an adult. So it's not an age-related thing. It's to do with the petals falling from the rose. So I think they've sidestepped that particular issue as well.
Yeah, because they were otherwise. It's like brutally punished children for their insubordination.
But isn't that the basis of all fairy tales? aren't they really, really horrible to kids in fairy tales? That's one of the reasons why I like them.
Yeah, that is true.
A degree of twattery.
You mentioned the Honest Trailer. Screen Junkies this week have done a thing with a behavioural scientist interview, and it's really, really entertaining because they go through the whole Disney lineup and talk about things like Stockholm Syndrome and what are these films actually saying to youngsters, and it's really, really quite amusing. So I would highly recommend you go and watch that. It's Screen Junkies, and it's an interview they've done this week, and it's a follow-up to their Beauty and the Beast Honest Trailer, where it was only mentioned in one line about Stockholm Syndrome, but that's the thing that everybody's picked up on in the comments, and obviously picked up on last week on our podcast as well, is that fact. And it's really quite entertaining talking to this therapist about the types of effects that these stories and things that happen within them, the kind of effects that they have on kids and their perceptions of the stories and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think if you actually took some of the Hans Christian Andersen and the Grimm's fairy tales and actually made them into films as they were originally written, it would traumatize most kids, I should imagine. They're pretty, no pun intended, grim in many respects. But anyway, it's a fun movie. What I found really interesting was the furore that surrounded its release in certain countries, and I'm mentioning Russia and Malaysia here, about the gay aspects, which I have to say are minimal. I mean, there's a character who's a bit camp, and he was pretty camp in the original cartoon, I think. And there was one scene right at the very end where he's dancing with another guy. And it's like, well, if that's what they're getting worked up about, they really need to sort themselves out, because that's ridiculous. I mean, it's a bloody musical, for God's sake. You can't get much more gay than that. So anyway, I loved the film. I really enjoyed it.
I do love in Steve's efforts to be politically correct. He still manages to be quite devastatingly political.
He does.
When
indeed.
in doubt, open fire on your own feet with both barrels, Withers style.
Yeah, okay. I think it's time to move on. So if we're going to the cinema this week, i.e. the week that the podcast is out, what can we go and see, Steve?
Well, hopefully I can go and see these films, because I'd like to see both of them if they're actually going to play at my local cinema. But we've got Free Fire, which is the new film from Ben Wheatley, who made, among other things, Kill List, and also most recently High Rise.
This looks like good fun.
It looks very funny in the trailers. Basically, a group of a series of gangs, I think, meet up in a warehouse to do an arms deal, and it all goes horribly wrong. They end up having a massive film-long gunfight in this warehouse, and it certainly looks like it's going to be entertaining and funny and action-packed in the trailer. And I'm quite looking forward to this. And I do like Ben Wheatley's work, so it's got a great cast too, with Brie Larson and Sharto Copley and people like that in it. So. Interested in that one.
Yeah,
that opens on Friday.
It looks a lot like it takes a lot of its death sequences from the sort of John Wick school of gun porn.
Yeah. If you sort of combine John Wick with Reservoir Dogs, I think you'd have Free Fire.
Yeah, with some comedy, really dark comedy added on top of that. It looks promising from the trailer. I'll be going to see that one.
Yeah,
I'm definitely going to see the next one, even though I've had no interest in this series whatsoever. But the lead actress and the suit that she wears will be there.
You mean Scarlett Johansson running around in what basically looks like a naked outfit?
Exactly.
Yeah, Ghost in the Shell. Now, I've never seen any. I mean, Mark, are you familiar with Ghost in the Shell, the original anime?
Yes.
I've seen it too.
Okay. I'm not familiar with either. My wife actually worked with the anime company in Tokyo on Ghost in the Shell, because she did book publishing and branding for them. So she actually wants to see this for that reason. And I want to see it for the reason that Phil just mentioned. Plus also, it looks like it'll be pure eye candy. So I will be at Ghost in the Shell. It's based on the anime, as I say. I'm not familiar with it personally, but it certainly looks impressive in the trailers. It was obviously shot in Hong Kong, but it's a highly stylized version of Hong Kong.
Did you still live there, Steve?
Yes, I did. The reason why I want to see it, but not the main reason.
Like you, I know nothing about Ghost in the Shell, so maybe quickly, Mark can just quickly fill us in without any spoilers or whatever. What is the world about? What is the premise of this?
It's kind of your typical, almost kind of. I guess it plumbs many of the same kind of things like your kind of RoboCops and that kind of thing, which is at what point does the kind of human end and the machine begin and those kind of things, and it's kind of tracking down. I was going to say ne'er-do-wells, but criminals and that kind of thing. And it's got a little kind of it's got quite a nice plot going on in the background, but it's generally trying to push the kind of cerebral angle of, what makes her, and, the kind of Deus Ex Machina, what is the ghost in the shell, so to speak. No spoilers there. That's very, very vague. But it was very much a kind of visual spectacle as an anime. It
has one sequence in particular towards the end of the film, which in terms of animation, it's a beautiful sequence, and I would hope that if they go anywhere near that in the live action film, they do so with a degree of deference and paying close attention to what made it really, really just gobsmackingly beautiful.
Yeah, and it gets around the kind of nudity aspect. I think people expect it to be kind of titillation, even in anime style, but I think it was anything but. They kind of work around that very well. It kind of makes sense in the universe, and I think if they handle it well, which I assume they will do, it's not going to have any kind of graphic nudity with a major actress in it, but it makes sense in the universe.
I wonder what the name of the suit is that she wears. Is it a birthday suit?
No.
There was some controversy around the casting of Scarlett Johansson because obviously she's white. But having said that, if you actually watch any anime, they never draw the characters to look Asian. They always have these big eyes and look very Western in terms of their looks. I think even the creator said he wasn't bothered by her casting.
Very much a kind of grey area. They almost kind of exist in their own kind of world. They're not usually kind of shown, unless it's got a historical aspect to it. It's not usually shown as being specifically of clearly one race or another.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously she's a big marquee name that will get the punters in for obvious reasons. So
me and you are going.
Yeah, at least two of us anyway. I'm looking forward to both those films, and let's fingers crossed they're actually playing at my cinema. I
think you need to change your cinema if that's the case.
Actually, you know what? I'm seriously thinking about ditching Cineworld and getting one of the Odeon cards you've got and going to the Odeon in Bath instead. This week might be the last straw for me. I've had enough. I think I will do exactly that.
Yeah. Okay, so let's move on.
Have you seen the new Baywatch trailer, Steve?
Yeah, it looks brilliant. Can't wait for that. It looks really, really good.
It does seem to deliver on many levels, So
I think the one thing going for it is that its tongue is very, 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 very coming out the other side of the cheek.
The shot, the bit when they've got Zac Efron in drag, just very funny. And the bit when he goes like, "Why don't we just call the police?" It's not what we do here at Baywatch. I thought we'd just save people from drowning. No, that looks like it's going to be great fun, and I'm well up for that. Well up for it.
Yeah, good stuff. Right, so for those of us that don't like going outside and mixing with other people, what could we buy on Blu-ray this week?
Oh, well, we're going to go through a few films here, but I think we're going to be leading in quite quickly to Mr. Botwright. So let's start with stuff, Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. This is out on DVD, Blu-ray, and Ultra HD Blu-ray. I believe it was a 4K DI, so that's good news. Dolby Atmos soundtrack. I enjoyed the film when I saw it at the cinema. I'm sure it'd be pure eye candy and a great disc to get, so thoroughly recommended there. We've got Bleed for This, which is the story of a boxer, true story of a boxer who had a terrible car crash, broke his neck.
Is this the guy that read our cinema review and then and give us?
He read our cinema review and then tweeted about it, which is a bit scary because obviously he's quite hard. And worryingly, having just proofed the Blu-ray review, Kaz takes a similar tack as Kamari did about the fact it's a familiar story. And I know what they mean. Obviously, this guy, don't get me wrong, massive respect for this guy. He broke his neck. He was told he'd probably never walk again, never mind fight. And not only did he walk again, but he got his title back. Now, I've got to say, all right, that deserves enormous respect. That takes balls the size of church bells. But the story of a boxer, or falling from grace for some reason, be it an accident or whatever, and then coming back is a familiar story. I mean, whether that's not his fault, that's just the fact that that's been the story since Rocky. So I understand what they're saying in a sense that that's a familiar kind of trope for boxing movies, but don't take away from the fact that this guy got his title back after breaking his neck. So yeah, fair enough. That is impressive. But yes, he did tweet that. I think the review said something like it's a familiar story of so and so, and he said, "Well, who else has done it but me?" fair point, Vinny. I'm not taking anything away from you.
Fair point, and yeah, like we said, the big up the guy.
Don't hit us.
Yeah, don't hit us, please. Or if you're going to hit anybody, hit Steve.
Yes, so that's coming out. Apparently, it's a very good Blu-ray in terms of picture quality and sound. So worth checking out if you're into boxing movies. I do actually think it is an interesting story, and I wouldn't mind seeing it myself. Moving on to, and I'm going to pass the baton straight over to Mr. Botwright here. We have the Criterion 6-disc collection of Lone Wolf and Cub, or as it's otherwise known, Shogun Assassin.
Is it 6-disc?
Yes, a 6 film set.
I thought it was 3-disc.
Oh, sorry, 3-disc 6 film set. So
three discs. Sorry. But that's better than we've had before, because Anime Igo released. We first had to have Shogun Assassin, and then they released Shogun Assassin 5-film Blu-ray collection, which was just the reworking of the first 2 films, obviously as Shogun Assassin, and then they basically dubbed over when that became a big kind of hit on the video nasty scene, and tried to turn the rest of the films just with a dub into other Shogun Assassin films. Then we got the Lone Wolf and Cub 2-disc set from Anime Igo, and now we're finally getting what seems to be what will be, I'm sure, the definitive collection. This has already been out in the States, but it's pretty big news, the fact that Criterion are releasing these on UK Blu-ray. And yeah, I'm massively looking forward to it, because it's 2K restoration, uncompressed mono track, and also it's coming with an, in quotes, high def presentation of Shogun Assassin. So hopefully it will be also the best version of Shogun Assassin along with. Can you
just explain what the Lone Wolf and Cub, how that relates to Shogun Assassin?
Yes. Well, basically, 70s manga by Kazuo Koike and Gosuke Kojima was adapted into a series of films based around this kind of wandering Ronin/assassin, which became the Lone Wolf and Cub films.
He's got his kid, isn't he, in a little baby cart?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. He takes his son along with him, and he's kind of seeking vengeance in the background, but it's more kind of about the series of kind of assassinations that he has to take on. Now, a chap got an American kind of pair director producer picked up the rights to the first 2 films, and then Robert Houston, director, cut them together and added a dub over them, kind of completely erasing the original plot pretty much. Very hammy dub. They had access to a Moog synthesizer as well, so they gave it a very interesting soundtrack, and it became something of a cult classic.
I've seen Shogun Assassin. I saw it on VHS years ago when I was a kid.
It makes no sense. It has no great conclusion to it. They just take, the 2 first films, as directed by Kenji Misumi, had probably the best action set pieces. And I think they bought the rights for something like $50,000 or something. And then it ended up on Roger Corman's Grindhouse circuit and that kind of thing. But it gained a cult following because it's just kind of got some of the best sword fights you will see in kind of any kind of Chanbara film. And so therefore, purists have wanted to see the originals, and I think we had to wait until pretty much kind of VHS to get them many moons ago. But yeah, this seems like it's going to give some headroom to the material. You'll have the 6 films then, 7 if you include Shogun Assassin, on 3 discs, which should be good enough. It's not overly swelled out with lots of kind of lossless tracks there. But yeah, it seems like they're getting lots of interviews, and it also says new English subtitle translation. So I'll be very interested to see how that differs from previous versions. But it's a good time.
Check it.
Yeah,
it's Japanese.
Yeah, it's a good time actually. Towards the end of a home format, if you're interested in, should we say, more niche films, that tends to be the moment when they start getting released. And the next couple of months, if you're into particularly Asian films, there are a few really, really good releases coming out. Some very interesting ones as well. Do you want me to tell you what I've got on pre-order?
Yeah,
go on then.
All right, fine. Okay, right. Arrow are releasing Doberman Cop and Wolf Guy, the Sonny Chiba films. And Wolf Guy, I believe, hasn't even had a home release on any format. So that sounds like a kind of strange monster movie /
Does Wolf Guy involve werewolves?
Yeah, I think it does.
And Sonny Chiba.
Yes,
I'm in.
Yeah, exactly. So you've got a bit of kind of bit of monster movie, a bit of cop. I think there's a serial killer in the background that he's tracking. Obviously Sonny Chiba is going to kind of kick a few people's asses, and then so that and Doberman Cop from Arrow, and also Drunken Master, Eureka, the Masters of Cinema collection. That's coming out as well. I think that's early April. So next couple of months seem very, very good.
Good stuff. Always interests me, these little titles coming out now and again, films that it takes a long time for them to come onto Blu-ray, but it looks like these companies, especially like say Eureka and Arrow and people like that they're actually taking the hours and hours and hours and hours that's required to remaster these things and encode them properly and put them out on formats like Blu-ray, looking the best that they're ever going to look.
Yeah,
I'm always staggered at the care and attention that goes in. I mean, like I said many times before, there's never been a better time to be a film fan when you consider you can get these small esoteric movies, restorations in a correct aspect ratio with original soundtracks, commentary tracks, extras, deleted scenes. I mean, when I think back to the days when I used to buy VHS tapes and £43 in scan of crappy prints with nothing extra, I can't imagine a better time than right now. And given that we're moving into this streaming world now where everything's going to be streamed eventually, if you're a film fan, buy this stuff while you can, because it won't be around forever.
Yeah, and I would say definitely for these smaller releases, if you're interested, grab them early, because I slept on the Criterion Zatoichi collection as well as the Yakuza papers as well, and they've just absolutely skyrocketed in price. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
In that I can sympathise. It does sound that some of these things, it sounds uncomfortably like album reissues on vinyl. It's like you blink and you miss it. I mean, that pink Fight Club that I bought and did the ceremonial unpeeling, those are now unopened ones. I stress, mine has been corrupted because I've opened it, but unopened ones of those are now fetching big bucks. Because there aren't any more of them. So it's as Steve says,
2, Ed, one to open and one to keep as a collector's item.
Yeah, we've had this conversation. I don't regard myself as a collector. I don't want to go down that particular rabbit hole. I have enough flaws already. But it's interesting. I do agree with you, Steve, that this is a great time in both music and film for fans of high quality physical media. But at the same time, there is this weird, ultimately, unless you happen to be minted, you're going to have to end up, it doesn't really matter what your poison is, you're going to end up prioritizing which one of them you want the most and hoping that some of the others might still be there as and when your finances are able to cope with another couple of purchases.
Or you just wait a few years, Ed, until the hipster lot disappear from the vinyl scene and then prices all recalibrate then. This
is true. And we'll see what happens. I mean, it's interesting that one of the people for whom I've done some work, they have recently both delighted and upset the vinyl fraternity because they are doing a repressing of the second Gorillaz album, Demon Days, which has been comfortably, original pressings of that have been comfortably commanding sort of 160 quid plus prices. And obviously the influx of a couple of thousand very high quality repressings is gonna mess about with that. But for those of us that missed out on it the first time round, it's great news. But this is a balance. This is why I don't regard myself as a collector. It's all about media that you want to enjoy, and at least with Mr. Botwright, there is a sense that none of these things are going to just sort of sit there saying I own that. He will get down and enjoy some drunken master action.
Well,
yes,
I think on that bombshell and the fact that it's getting close to lunchtime, and I'm really looking forward to my haggis sandwich with my curly wurly and a can of iron brew.
Every Scottish cliche ticked. You're going to deep fry that sandwich. And
it's going to take all of them and deep fry it.
Yeah. Well, no, actually, I'm heading out to the detailers because he's got my refund for me from Ford for the bad paintwork, and he's going to wash my car properly as well. So there you go. Exciting afternoon.
I haven't washed mine yet.
Ed, your car will never be washed until you need to hand it back.
Correct. I now own a brown Fiesta ST. It's great.
It's brown. It should be white with the salt, should it not?
No. We're not salting down here because remember we're well south of the Arctic Circle in Milton Keynes, so it's not an issue. So we just got road grime.
But the Arctic Circle must start again at Steve's house because he's always complaining about how cold he is.
No, that's because
my house is really cold and I'm old. Yeah.
Remember, it's in the winter. Old people die in these conditions. We'll be seeing if we can get some extra money out with us soon.
To get my flu jab every year now.
Huddled in front of his 1-bar electric fire whilst a sad violin piece plays in the background.
My fuel winter allowance.
Well, no, you get enough TVs and well, you see that's the thing. Plasma's away now because plasma was always a good way to heat the room. Yeah. You'll just have to get loads of projectors in, Steve.
Yeah, loads of valve amplifiers or something like that.
I only ever get sent those in the summer.
Funnily enough, all the projectors seem to come out in the summer as well. Where you
can't sit in a dark room.
Yeah. You just think every time you read a projector review during the summer, I'm sitting there in my boxers and that's it.
And on that bombshell.
Sleep well.
That's it. Thanks very much for listening. I've lost my running order. I don't know who's on the podcast. They're all going to say goodbye. Hey, give me a second. I need to read these things.
Every week.
That's it for the AVForums podcast this week. My thanks to Steve Withers.
Toughened your nipples, didn't it?
Mark Hodgkinson.
All good things to those who wait.
It's Selley.
Memory Agent Starling is what I have instead of a view.
And Mark Botwright.
Desperately random.
Don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook, bookmark AVForums for latest reviews, news and videos, and of course, leave us those 5-star ratings on iTunes, but only if you enjoyed the show. And I'm Phil Hinton. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you next week.